I've been thinking about something lately. Something that comes up every time the economy takes a turn for the worse. See, I'm in my 90 seconds now, and I've watched a lot of recessions come and go. The Great Depression of the 30 seconds, the oil crisis of the 70 seconds, the dot-com bubble, the 2008 financial crisis, and most recently the pandemic recession. And through all of these downturns, I've noticed something fascinating. Something most people don't talk about at dinner tables or around the water cooler. There's a pattern, a clear, unmistakable pattern in how wealthy people behave during recessions versus how the poor and middle class react. And I'm not saying this to be divisive or to suggest that one group is smarter than the other. Not at all. It's about mindset. It's about knowledge. And most importantly, it's about having the financial education and resources to see opportunity where others see only disaster. Now, before I dive in, let me be clear about something. I've said this publicly many times. I think the system is tilted in ways that aren't quite fair. I pay a lower effective tax rate than my secretary does. And that's not right. But I didn't write the rules. I'm just playing by them. And what I'm about to share with you are the 5 things wealthy people do during recessions that the poor and middle class typically don't. Not because they can't, but often because they don't know, or they don't have the capital, or they're too scared. So let's get into it. Stick with me here, because understanding these 5 things might just change how you think about money, investing, and building wealth for the rest of your life. Thing number 1, the rich buy assets when everyone else is selling. You know, I've always said, be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. It's probably one of my most quoted lines, and there's a reason for that. It works, but it's so much easier to say than it is to do. During a recession, the natural human instinct is to panic. The stock market crashes. Real estate prices plummet. Businesses go bankrupt. People lose their jobs. The media broadcasts doom and gloom 24/7. And in the midst of all this chaos, what does the average person do? They sell. They liquidate their stocks. They try to hold on to cash. They become paralyzed by fear. But the wealthy, they do the exact opposite. They buy. Let me give you a concrete example. In 2008, during the depths of the financial crisis, I invested $5 billion in Goldman Sachs. People thought I was crazy. The financial system was collapsing. Banks were failing left and right. But I saw something different. I saw that the U.S. government wasn't going to let the entire financial system collapse. I saw that Goldman Sachs, despite its troubles, was fundamentally a strong company. And most importantly, I saw that I could get a fantastic deal. I negotiated terms that gave Berkshire Hathaway preferred shares with a 10% dividend and warrants to buy common stock. It was one of the best deals I've ever made. Within a few years, Berkshire made billions on that investment. But I could only make that investment because I had capital available when others didn't. This principle doesn't just apply to billionaires making $5 billion investments. It applies at every level. During the 2008 crisis, regular investors who had cash on hand and continued to buy stocks or real estate when prices were at their lowest made tremendous gains over the following decade. Those who panicked and sold, they locked in their losses and missed the recovery. According to research from the Resolution Foundation, wealthy individuals with liquid assets can actually see their income rise during recessions, while the bottom 95% see their incomes decline. Why? Because they have the capital to invest when assets are cheap. A study found that after the 2008 recession, the wealthy were the only group whose wealth recovered and exceeded pre-recession levels. Think about real estate. During the 2008 housing crisis, housing prices dropped by more than 30% in many markets. Middle-class families who were over-leveraged lost their homes to foreclosure. But wealthy investors, they swooped in and bought properties at 50, 60, sometimes 70 cents on the dollar. They held those properties, rented them out, and when the market recovered, those investments appreciated tremendously. The key here is liquidity. The wealthy keep significant cash reserves or have access to credit lines that allow them to act quickly when opportunities arise. According to financial data, Berkshire Hathaway entered 2024 with over $334 billion in cash reserves. That's not by accident. I've been building that cash position because I know that when the next recession hits, there will be extraordinary opportunities to deploy that capital. Now, I know what you're thinking. Warren, I don't have billions of dollars sitting around. I live paycheck to paycheck, and I understand that. The majority of Americans don't have $400 available for an emergency. But here's the thing, this principle scales. Even if you can only save $50 a month, putting that money aside so you have it available during a downturn can make a difference. The amount doesn't matter as much as the habit and the mindset. The rich understand something fundamental about recessions. They're temporary. Always have been, always will be. Since 1900, the average recession has lasted about 15 months. But the economic expansions that follow them, those last years, sometimes decades. So, if you can position yourself to buy assets when they're cheap and hold them through the recovery, you'll build wealth. The poor and middle class, on the other hand, often do the opposite. They sell when prices are low because they're scared or because they need the cash to survive. And then, when prices start rising again and the economy recovers, they buy back in at higher prices. Buy high, sell low. It's the opposite of what you should do, but it's what most people end up doing because they let emotions drive their decisions. So, the first thing the rich do during recessions that the poor and middle class don't, they buy assets aggressively when everyone else is selling in panic. Thing number two, the rich preserve capital and avoid panic selling. This one ties closely to the first point, but it's worth exploring separately because the psychology is different. During a recession, the average investor watches their portfolio drop 20%, 30%, maybe even 40% or more. They see their retirement account shrinking. They see their home value declining. And they panic. They think, if I don't sell now, I'll lose everything. So they sell often at the worst possible time. But wealthy investors, they've been through this before. They understand that market downturns are part of the cycle. They know that if they just hold on, if they just wait it out, the market will recover. History proves this again and again. Let me share something with you. I've been investing for over 80 years. And that time I've seen the stock market crash more times than I can count. And you know what? Every single time, it came back. Every single time. The S&P 500 has never failed to recover from a downturn and reach new highs. It might take a year, it might take 5 years, but it always comes back. According to historical data, the S&P 500 has declined by an average of 32% during the last 9 recessions. That's terrifying if you're looking at your account balance. But here's what most people forget. If you stayed invested through those downturns, you not only recovered your losses, but you likely came out ahead because you also captured the recovery in the bull market that followed. The Federal Reserve's forecasting tool showed in late 2023 that there was a 51.84% probability of recession within 12 months, the highest reading in 4 decades. Markets dropped on that news. A lot of people sold. But investors who understood the long-term nature of investing held on or bought more. Wealthy people preserve capital by not making emotional decisions. They stick to their plan. They have a diversified portfolio. They don't check their accounts every day and panic over every fluctuation. They think in decades, not days. There's a famous story about the 2008 financial crisis. During the worst of it, many wealthy investors received calls from their financial advisors or wealth managers worried about the markets. And you know what a lot of them said? Don't call me unless there's something I need to do. Otherwise, I don't want to hear about it. That's the mentality. They knew that looking at their statements would only cause emotional distress. They knew the right move was to do nothing, to stay the course. And most importantly, they had enough wealth and diversification that even if their stock portfolio dropped 40%, they weren't going to go hungry. They had real estate, they had bonds, they had alternative investments, and they had cash. The middle class often doesn't have that luxury. If your entire retirement is in a 401 and you watch it drop from $500,000 to $300,000, that's scary. That's real money. And the temptation to save what's left by selling is overwhelming. But that's exactly when you shouldn't sell. If you sell, you turn paper losses into real losses. You lock in the damage. But if you hold, You give yourself a chance to recover. Now, there is one important caveat here. Preserving capital also means not being over-leveraged. The wealthy avoid excessive debt, especially high-interest debt. During a recession, if you're carrying too much debt and you lose your income, you're forced to sell assets to cover your obligations. That's a disaster. So, the second thing the rich do during recessions, they preserve capital by avoiding panic selling and staying invested for the long term. Thing number 3, the rich use recessions to upgrade their skills and businesses. Here's something most people don't think about. Recessions aren't just about investing in stocks and real estate. They're also about investing in yourself and in your business. During economic downturns, the rich double down on education, skill development, and business positioning. Why? Because they know that when the economy recovers, they want to be in the best possible position to take advantage of the upswing. Let me give you a historical example. During the 1665 plague outbreak in England, Cambridge University closed, and a young student named Isaac Newton was sent home. What did he do during that lockdown? He didn't panic. He didn't sit around worrying. He worked. He studied. He experimented. And in that 1 year, he developed the foundations of calculus, formulated his theories of optics, and conceived the laws of motion and gravity. 1 year changed the course of science forever. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to be Isaac Newton, but the principle is the same. Recessions create time and opportunity to improve yourself. During the 2008 recession, while millions of people were losing their jobs, others were going back to school, getting certifications, learning new skills, and when the economy recovered, those people were more valuable, more employable, more promotable. I saw this firsthand in the business world. In 2009, companies that continued to invest in their people, in their technology, in their processes, even when times were tough, came out of the recession stronger than their competitors who cut everything to the bone. Here's another example. During the 2008 recession, businesses started shifting away from expensive traditional advertising like TV and radio ads toward digital marketing and social media. According to a 2009 survey by Marketing Sherpa, 48% of firms predicted their spending on social media would increase despite the recession. People who develop skills in social media marketing, digital advertising, and content creation were suddenly in high demand. Those who saw that shift and positioned themselves accordingly built lucrative careers. The wealthy understand this. They invest in education. They hire coaches and consultants. They attend conferences and workshops, even during or especially during recessions, because they know that knowledge and skills are assets that can't be taken away and that appreciate over time. For business owners, recessions are an opportunity to streamline operations, improve efficiency, and position for growth. While competitors are cutting back, smart business owners invest in their best people, improve their products, and take market share. Think about companies like Apple. In 2001, during the dot-com crash and right after 9/11, Apple launched the iPod. The economy was in shambles and people were scared, but Apple saw an opportunity to offer a cheaper entertainment alternative. People couldn't afford to go to concerts or buy expensive electronics, but they could afford a $399 iPod. It became a massive success and set the stage for the iPhone a few years later. Or think about Airbnb and Uber, both of which launched during or right after the 2008 recession. They provided cheaper alternatives to hotels and taxis. They met the moment, and they became billion-dollar companies. The rich also understand that during recessions, talent is available. Good people get laid off through no fault of their own. If you're a business owner with capital, a recession is a great time to hire top-tier talent that you couldn't afford or attract during boom times. And on a personal level, if you're employed, a recession is the time to make yourself indispensable. Go above and beyond. Learn new skills that make you more valuable to your employer. Position yourself as someone they can't afford to lose. The poor and middle class often do the opposite during recessions. They hunker down. They stop learning. They stop taking risks. They become reactive instead of proactive. And when the recovery comes, they're no better position than they were before. So, the third thing the rich do during recessions, They invest in themselves, their skills, and their businesses to come out of the downturn stronger and better positioned. Thing number 4, the rich strategically use debt as a tool. Now, this one is counterintuitive. Most people think that during a recession, you should avoid debt at all costs. And for most people, that's probably true. High interest consumer debt, credit cards, payday loans, that stuff will kill you. You should avoid it like the plague. But the wealthy think about debt differently. They use debt strategically as a tool to build wealth, especially during recessions. Let me explain. During recessions, interest rates often drop as central banks try to stimulate the economy. Low interest rates mean cheap money. And if you can borrow money cheaply and invest it in assets that will appreciate or generate income higher than the interest rate, you're using leverage to amplify your returns. I talked earlier about the buy, borrow, die strategy. During recessions, the borrow part becomes even more powerful. Let's say you own a piece of real estate that you bought before the recession. Maybe it's worth less now than it was at the peak, but you're not selling. You know it will recover. Meanwhile, interest rates have dropped. You go to the bank and refinance your mortgage at a lower rate, or you do a cash out refinance and pull out equity. That cash is tax-free because it's borrowed money, and you can use it to invest in other assets that are now cheap because of the recession. Or think about businesses. During a recession, if you have access to credit, you can borrow to acquire competitors who are struggling to buy equipment at discounted prices, or to invest in expansion while your competition is retrenching. The key is that wealthy people borrow against appreciating assets at low interest rates and invest that borrowed money into opportunities that will generate returns exceeding the cost of the debt. It's leverage. And used wisely, leverage is incredibly powerful. But here's the catch. Leverage cuts both ways. If you borrow too much and the assets you invested in decline further, or if you can't service the debt because you lost your income, leverage can destroy you. That's why the wealthy are careful. They don't over-leverage. They borrow conservatively, usually against assets with stable or growing value. They maintain cash reserves to service the debt, even if income drops. The average person, on the other hand, tends to accumulate bad debt used to finance consumption rather than investment. They put a vacation on a credit card at 20% interest. They buy a car they can't afford with a high interest loan. And when the recession hits and they lose their job or their hours get cut, that debt becomes an anchor that drags them under. There's a study that came out after the 2008 recession showing that wealthy individuals were able to actually benefit from higher interest rates during parts of the recovery because they had savings and investments that generated returns, while lower income individuals were crushed by the cost of servicing debt. The Resolution Foundation found that the top 5% of earners were the only group in the UK whose income was expected to rise during the downturn that followed 2023 inflation concerns, in part due to their ability to leverage financial tools like strategic borrowing and investing. The rich also understand that in a recession, it might be easier to negotiate better terms on loans if you have good credit and collateral. Banks still want to lend money. They just want to lend it to safe borrowers. If you're wealthy with a strong balance sheet, you're a safe borrower. So you can negotiate favorable terms that the average person can't access. And here's something else. During recessions, distressed assets come onto the market. Businesses fail. People foreclose on homes. These assets often sell at steep discounts. If you have access to capital, either through savings or through borrowing, you can acquire these assets cheaply. Real estate investors, in particular, love recessions for this reason. They buy properties at huge discounts, hold them, rent them out, and when the market recovers, they sell or refinance for a substantial profit. Now, again, I want to be clear, this strategy is not for everyone. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you shouldn't be borrowing money to invest in the stock market. That's reckless. But if you're financially stable, if you have income security, if you have cash reserves, then understanding how to use debt as a tool during a recession can accelerate your wealth building. So, the fourth thing the rich do during recessions, they strategically use low interest debt to invest in undervalued assets and amplify their returns. Thing number 5. The rich focus on recession-proof and essential sectors. Here's the last one, and it's something I've done throughout my entire career. Invest in businesses and sectors that are recession-resistant. Not all industries are affected equally during a recession. Some sectors get crushed. Luxury goods, travel, hospitality, discretionary retail, these industries suffer when people tighten their belts. But other sectors, they do just fine. In some cases, they even thrive. Think about it. No matter how bad the economy gets, people still need to eat. They still need health care. They still need to keep the lights on, the water running, and the heat working. These are essentials, and the companies that provide essentials tend to be much more stable during downturns. That's why I've always loved investing in companies like Coca-Cola, which I've owned for decades. People are going to drink Coke whether the economy is booming or busting. It's a consumer staple. Same thing with companies like Procter & Gamble, which makes toothpaste, soap, diapers, things people can't live without. Healthcare is another recession-proof sector. People get sick regardless of the economy. They need medicine, they need doctors, they need hospitals. Pharmaceutical companies, healthcare providers, medical device manufacturers, these businesses tend to hold up well during recessions. Utilities are another great example. Electricity, water, gas, you can't just stop using these things because there's a recession. Utility companies often have regulated monopolies, stable cash flows, and consistent dividends. They're boring, but boring is good during a recession. Even certain types of retail can be recession resistant. Discount retailers like Walmart and Dollar General often do well during recessions because people trade down from more expensive stores. If you can't afford to shop at Whole Foods anymore, you go to Walmart. These companies can actually see increased traffic during economic downturns. After the 2008 crisis, CNBC's Jim Cramer advised investors to buy tangible stocks, companies that make real things, do real stuff, and turn a profit. He specifically mentioned food stocks as recession-proof safe havens, highlighting companies like General Mills, Kellogg, and Campbell's Soup. The wealthy understand this. During recessions, they shift their portfolios toward defensive sectors. They reduce exposure to cyclical industries, things like automotive construction, luxury goods, and increase exposure to consumer staples, healthcare, utilities, and other essentials. They also look at services that become more important during recessions. For example, financial advisors and accountants often see increased demand during downturns because people need help managing their finances, budgeting, dealing with debt, and navigating complex situations. And here's another angle. The wealthy invest in businesses that provide cheaper alternatives. During recessions, people still want entertainment, but they can't afford expensive options. So they look for cheaper substitutes. That's why Netflix and other streaming services exploded during and after the 2008 recession. People couldn't afford to go out to movies or buy expensive cable packages, but they could afford $10 a month for streaming. Or think about companies that enable the sharing economy, like Uber and Airbnb. These companies provided cheaper alternatives to traditional services. Need a ride but can't afford a taxi? Use Uber. Need a place to stay but can't afford a hotel? Use Airbnb. Both companies launched during the 2008 recession and became massive successes because they met the needs of a cash-strapped population. The rich also understand that certain skills and professions are recession-proof. Healthcare workers, teachers, public safety workers, utility workers, IT professionals, these jobs tend to have more security during downturns. If you're considering a career change or if you're a young person choosing a career path, thinking about recession-proof industries can provide more stability over your lifetime. The poor and middle class, on the other hand, are often concentrated in cyclical industries or jobs that are vulnerable during recessions. They work in manufacturing, construction, retail, hospitality sectors that see massive layoffs during downturns. And when they lose their jobs, they don't have the financial cushion to weather the storm. So, the fifth thing the rich do during recessions, they focus their investments and careers on recession-proof essential sectors that remain stable or even grow during economic downturns. Pulling it all together, Mindset makes all the difference. So there you have it. 5 things the rich do during recessions that the poor and middle class typically don't. 1. They buy assets aggressively when everyone else is selling. 2. They preserve capital and avoid panic selling by staying invested for the long term. 3. They invest in themselves, their skills, and their businesses to emerge stronger. 4. They strategically use low-interest debt to amplify their investments. 5. They focus on recession-proof and essential sectors. Now, I want to address something important. You might be thinking, Warren, this all sounds great, but I don't have millions of dollars. How does this apply to me? And here's my answer. It applies at every level. The amounts don't matter as much as the principles. You don't need to be a billionaire to save an emergency fund. You don't need to be rich to avoid panic selling your investments. You don't need millions to invest in yourself and learn new skills. You don't need to be wealthy to understand the difference between good debt and bad debt. And you don't need a fortune to recognize which sectors are stable during downturns. The difference between the rich and the poor isn't just money. It's mindset. It's education. It's perspective. The wealthy think long term. They think in decades. They understand that wealth is built slowly through patience, discipline, and smart decision making. They see recessions as opportunities, not disasters. The poor and middle class often think short term. They react emotionally. They make decisions based on fear rather than logic. And they miss opportunities because they're too focused on just surviving today. Now, I'm not saying this is entirely their fault. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, if you don't have any savings, if you don't have job security, it's hard to think long term. It's hard to invest in the future when you're struggling to pay rent today. I get that. And that's why I've advocated for policies that create more economic opportunity and security for everyone. But within the constraints of your situation, whatever that situation is, you can start applying these principles. Even in small ways. Start building an emergency fund. Even if it's just $20 a month. Don't sell your investments when the market drops. Even if it's scary, invest in learning a new skill. Even if it's through free online courses. Avoid high-interest debt like the plague. And think about how you can position yourself in industries or jobs that are more stable. These things won't make you a millionaire overnight. But over time, over years and decades, they will put you in a much better position than if you don't do them. I've been investing for over 80 years. I've seen more recessions than most people will see in their lifetimes. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, recessions are temporary. They always end. And when they do, the people who position themselves wisely during the downturn are the ones who come out ahead. The rich get richer during recessions not because the system is rigged, though in some ways it is, but because they have the knowledge, the resources, and the mindset to see opportunity where others see only fear. And now you know what they do. You know the playbook. The question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Are you going to panic the next time the market crashes? Or are you going to take a deep breath, remember these principles, and ask yourself, how can I position myself to benefit when this is over? Are you going to sell your investments at the bottom? Or are you going to hold on, stay patient, and let compounding work its magic? Are you going to spend all your time worrying? Or are you going to use a downturn as an opportunity to improve yourself, learn new skills, and position for the recovery? Are you going to drown in bad debt? Or are you going to understand the difference between debt that destroys and debt that builds? Are you going to work in industries that are vulnerable, or are you going to position yourself in sectors that remain stable? These are the choices. These are the decisions that separate those who build wealth from those who don't. Look, I'm not perfect. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life. I've missed opportunities. I've made bad investments. But the reason I've been successful is that I've stayed disciplined. I've thought long term. I've kept learning. I've stayed patient. And I've always tried to be greedy when others were fearful. You can do the same. It doesn't require genius. It doesn't require luck. It requires discipline, education, and the courage to go against the crowd when everyone else is panicking. Recessions are part of the economic cycle. They're inevitable. There will be another one. Maybe soon. Maybe not for a few years, but it's coming. And when it does, you have a choice. You can be like most people and let fear drive your decisions. or you can be like the wealthy and see it as the opportunity it truly is. I hope you'll choose the latter. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'm going to go have a Coca-Cola and play some bridge. Thank you for listening, and good luck out there. Remember, patience, discipline, and a long-term perspective. That's how wealth is built. Not just during recessions, but all the time. Take care.